Okay, this probably looks much more formal than it is and needs to be, but we're very pleased and honoured to have with us today Lee Saunders, daughter of Conroy Maddox, joined by Elza Adamowicz, who we've heard from previously. Roger Shannon, who I mentioned earlier, was very instrumental in getting Maddox-related events off the ground here. And we've got as well Izzy Mohammed, who's Ordnance Development Coordinator, and Saskia, of course, who you've heard from as well. I'll start off with just a few very loosely structured questions, but after that the discussion I think should really take its own direction and its own energy, and that very much includes comments from the floor, so feel free to chip in, either just to kind of blurt out questions or to stick your hand up and we'll feed it as we go. I wanted to start off with, Lee, whether you feel able to kind of give any sense of what your father might have made of all this. I mean, would he have felt that, like Aragon felt, you know, surrealism was specific to its time, once it's over, that's it? Or would he have felt that the spirit should be sort of retained?
Oh no, definitely to continue. Yes, I'm sure about that. Yes, yes. I mean, he painted right up until he died, really. Even in hospital, he used to do these backgrounds on board, and I used to take them in for him, and he would do his collages still, you know. Then I'd take huge pieces of A3 paper, marker pens and things, and he would draw not only on the paper but all over the bed sheets as well. You know? And the hospital thought he was terrific, so they let him do all that, which was great. So yeah, he would definitely want it all to continue.
And was the art all around the house when you were growing up, or was it? Or did you
all the time, yes. No, art was always there. And in fact, the house we lived in Speedwell Road in Birmingham, he painted all the wallpaper himself. My mother also was very creative, so she made everything. You know, she did weaving and fabric and all those things. So it was a very kind of creative buzz to the whole place, actually, in Speedwell Road. I remember that very clearly.
Well, there were lots of stories, I think, circulating in the writing about that time of parties and things. Could you say something about the kinds of people that would kind of come in and out of the house?
Well, the house seemed to be full all the time, is my recollection. I mean, not just with adults, but with children as well. But yes, lots of people used to come, and we had quite a large room at the back of the house, and not too many seats, so often people would be sitting on the floor, you know, or standing behind even. So, yes, always lots of people at the house. Yeah, yeah, lots of lively discussion and loud voices and things too, and a bit of alcohol.
George Melly used to visit, didn't he?
George and Desmond Morris, yeah, they were frequently there. Yeah, yeah, and people from other countries too that used to come a lot. People from Poland, I remember coming, and Dad in fact did, that was where the Minotaur came from for the book. Stefan, and my brother I think was named after Stefan. So yeah. So yes, lot went on at that time, yes, yeah, very lively.
Yes, go for it.
Would you say you had a particular sense of humour? Because I'm looking at some of the names of some of the things that some of his paintings. He seemed to take great delight in naming some of them.
He did, yeah.
And chose those. And I was talking to Saskia earlier, and I was saying that I thought that maybe if you, I don't know whether it's correct if you could say this, if you characterised Breton as a sort of hardline Marxist, would you, maybe you wouldn't, but hardline.
Some Marxists wouldn't.
Yes.
Would you describe, in the same characteristics, could you describe your father maybe as a sort of an anarcho-Marxist, in the sense that he liked to be...
He was anarchic.
Yeah, but he continually liked to have a bit of a fight as well.
Oh yes,
the
definitely.
expelling of people seems to me to be a parallel from what I remember when I first went to university. I remember I landed up in a house with two Maoists who'd been in a sect with three Maoists, but they expelled the other Maoist. They were husband and wife, professor of politics at the time he was. But I mean, it was very interesting that he was involved in these sort of disputes and he had very firm views.
Yes, he did.
Seems to have characterised it.
Yeah. And I think that went into every area of his life actually.
Yeah.
Yes, it was always challenging. Very vocal actually, and about disagreeing with things.
Because in the interview he gives in the short passage, he talks about why he was in reserved occupation during the war, or at least
well, he seemed to have 3 different occupations during the war.
He seems to say that.
Yes.
And he said he didn't want to go into the army because they did too much walking. He didn't approve of flying, and he didn't agree with the notion of being in the Navy because it was women and children first. I mean, it just struck me as that was, hugely surrealistic and comedic. Would you agree?
Yes, I would, yeah. He did have a great sense of the ridiculous, actually, which I think was brilliant, and he had that all his life, I think. Yeah.
You mentioned his occupations during the war. Yeah. I mean, there currently is an exhibition on at the museum, an art gallery in town, and also at Millennium Point, of the work of, I can't remember his first name, but is it Roland Emmett?
Mm-hmm.
He's a Birmingham artist and engineer whose strange contraptions appear in the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And this exhibition is all about his work. Well, during the war, he got Conroy Maddox a job in the Jewellery Quarter to use his photographic skills, and that's one of the 3 salaries that were mentioned. Yeah. This idea of him being an anarchic and possibly linked to Marxism, I'm not sure about, but he was involved in politics.
Oh, communism. There was a link with communism.
And I think also he was known by the appropriately surrealist nickname of Coma. Conroy Maddox. C-O-M-A. Coma, which is suitable to me, a suitable surrealist nickname to have. Always in a dreamlike state, obviously.
I think it's important that you brought out humour, actually, and I should have mentioned it earlier, because to me, for the surrealists and for the Dadaists and a lot of other avant-gardists, humour is more than just a way of having a laugh. It's actually an ethics. And particularly for the Dadaists, it's always seemed to me that it's a way of being a good person, of being good to other people. I mean, yes, you laugh at other people, but you laugh at yourself as well. There's perhaps a severe sort of shortage of that in somebody like Breton and some of the others. But I think you're right to point to humour and
yeah, it was very much a part of him. Yeah.
Was the formalised life this idea of the dressing up and wearing?
No, he just was a very dapper individual. He was. Yeah, he just was. Yeah, he felt comfortable in a suit and his tie, and yeah.
Yes, Fran.
Can I ask about the kind of, I suppose the market for Conroy Maddox's work, and where is he exhibiting, and is there a kind of critical response to his, historical response to his work? Because obviously we have people who are art historians who are writing about him now, such as Silvano and Debbie. I'm just wondering what the critical response at the time that he was producing his work was, and the exhibition issue.
Well, he did show internationally while he was alive, and as I say, he painted right up until the end, really. He was very prolific. I mean, there's a lot of works, and an awful lot got sold during his lifetime, partly to Silvano, I have to say. And also to Geoffrey Sherwin, you may have heard of. And Geoffrey is constantly promoting Conroy's works, and holds his own surreal exhibitions, because he has his own collection, actually, of surrealist works and other kinds of works too. What I did after my father died, it's quite a responsibility, actually, being the daughter of somebody who's got all this stuff. In terms of archiving material about him, and his library, actually, that all went to the National Art Gallery in Scotland, and they've recreated his library up there for me. And also they've got a lot of his archival stuff there. And then I contacted the Tate, or the Tate came to see me, because he still has some works there, and asked if they could archive some of his stuff. And I said, yes, fine. But then they heard that I'd also sent this stuff off to Scotland and were furious. And I said, well, that's just ridiculous, because he lived in London, you know, he's got stuff at the Tate. It's quite mad that you don't have some of the archive stuff here. And they agreed. And Nick Serotto had celebrated a birthday with Dad, his 80th birthday, actually. And he said, yes, of course, you know, we must have your father's stuff. So it's kind of split between those two places. So, you know, anybody wanting to find out more about his work can certainly access those archives. And they're very thorough, they're very comprehensive, actually. You know, I went through everything kind of chronologically. So all the different people involved, the different kinds of surrealist manifestos, the London Bulletin you talked about, all of those pamphlets, all of those have gone. So they're all there for people to look at. They're very interesting, actually, very interesting, yeah.
And are any of his works in local galleries or museums at all?
Yes, there's actually Oscar Miller. His daughter has a gallery in Oxford, so some of his works are constantly on show there. A few have been sold there as well. And Silvano had been trying to get somewhere to have a sort of permanent exhibition, because it's always a question of storage with these things, you know, dry storage. So we're still trying to work on that one, actually. Yeah.
So, sorry, so did he have a gallery that was selling his work?
Yes, in London, where we lived, because I lived in the next road to Dad, actually, the Belgrave Gallery had, I think, 3 exhibitions for his works there, which were very successful. Yeah, I'm still in touch with the owner of that, yeah. Oh, he's not, he's moved now, but yeah.
There must be some in the Birmingham gallery, so.
I'm sure there is, but I don't know about the Birmingham. I know about the London ones. There was the Mayor Gallery. There's another one in St James. Can't remember the name of it, sorry. There's the Cork Street Gallery, the Mayor Gallery. Something St James, in London anyway. Yeah, so those were the ones that I knew about, yeah.
I think the reason I'm asking is, so he made a living as an artist.
That's an interesting question, actually, because I think he was a very generous man. I think on occasion he was taken advantage of. So I don't think he would have relied on that income. And I think as well that although he was known, I don't think there were particularly high prices attached to his work. And I think there's something about people trying to raise his profile, because he did, in effect, spend his whole life working towards that, you know. But I think as well there's something about, you know, the pictures themselves, you know, compared to other well-known surrealists. And there's something else about my father which I think involved a much broader remit, which was to do with the kind of academic side of it as well. So that may have detracted somewhat from the value of the paintings. Because currently, I know that the paintings aren't raising high prices. You know, if you go to I had to have valuations done at one time, and certainly they weren't, the prices weren't, you know. They were affordable for everybody. We put it that way.
We've got a question here and then a question here.
Yeah.
So you had your hands up earlier.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to change the subject, but I like the idea of the list of the slightly bizarre, slightly surreal. You know, nothing more surreal than seeing a red telephone box in the middle of the Dales. You know what I mean? And imagine, I was just thinking, there's a rain, an empty street, some person all in yellow, can't see the face, holding this staff and a small child, and we define it as a lollipop lady.
Yeah, that's nice, yeah. He had a wonderful image in hospital, actually, which was an orchestra sitting on an egg, which I thought was brilliant. It's a great image, isn't it?
Marjorie.
Well, I was just going to say that Lee and I were discussing the fact that he was, his work, that everyone's talking about, his legacy and what he left behind, but when an artist is actually themselves their creation in a way, and that they are surreal themselves, or their imagination represents what is surreal in the world. How do you continue with that? You don't necessarily have to have it represented as a painting.
No,
It's
that's right.
his ideas and his culture that he embodied. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of his paintings, but his character and his imagination, how do you keep that sustained?
Yeah.
Well, when we spoke to residents from Balsall Heath in the workshops, many, not all, actually felt very strongly that they would want the spirit of and name and presence of Conroy Maddox to be a central part of anything that we would do, and that many residents seem to feel kind of proud that you know, Birmingham had got this sort of bizarre reputation as the sort of headquarters of UK surrealism in the 40s and 50s. With a direct line, I think that was a really nice point you made, Elza, direct to Paris.
Yeah.
The idea of the house is great, because in some of Maddox's writings he talks about the house that he was in Balsall Heath, that he wanted to create. Each room would be surreally different from another room, so it would be a surreal house, and he wanted to create that. I don't know whether that's in his Speedwell Roadhouse or...
In Speedwell Road, he built the most incredible structures in our bedrooms.
Oh, that must be part of it then. and there is a tradition of developing houses in honour of artists. There's a house in Mexico, which is Louis Buñuel's house, where he lived, and it's now, you know, a small kind of monument to Louis Buñuel, as the French writer and theatre director Jacques Prévert. There's his house in Brittany is in the same way. You can go there, you can see the kind of life he lived, but also it's got the ethos and the character, and you know, pulsates with the person there. And obviously, you know, the idea of having one in Balsall Heath is great. It'd be great. I mean, for me, one of the interesting things about coming across this group is it helps me develop a different history of Birmingham's radical culture, because you know, in Birmingham we often, you know, will say yes, the Pre-Raphaelites, and yes, some other groups, but with a group such as the Birmingham Surrealist group, led by Conroy Maddox, there's now this fascinating development in the 30s, which goes right through to the early 50s, in a part of Birmingham which has always been, in the last sort of decade, where lots of new cultures arrived, and it just adds something more exceptional to the history of Birmingham. So I think the more we do about it, and I think it's great that Stephen and Saskia got this event off the ground today, because it just adds more and more, amplifies the story that there are these neglected cultures in Birmingham, and we should drill back down into them and try and do more work on them.
I think drill down into them, but also open them up.
Yeah.
Explore what it means today in the communities that those artworks initially kind of took place or were performed, and just explore those kind of lineages, but for the communities that live there today. And that might be an interesting point to bring in Izzy, who will have his own thoughts on how that might play out in Balsall Heath today.
Just very briefly, reason why I'm here at the early stage of developing the idea. Saskia approached us. I'm an audience engagement coordinator at the Library of Birmingham, and so I'm sort of quite well used to working with communities and trying to find ways. I mean, a lot of my work is about interventions, about, you know, we talk about cultural engagement and cultural participation, so it's all about engagement and intervention, in the knowledge that, for example, some kind of change needs to happen because people aren't coming in the library or going into a museum or whatever. So, you know, I guess when you approach with this idea, there was this history firstly, and I thought that's fascinating. My own background is in the arts and visual arts and museums background and so on. but then to try and transport it through time as if in a TARDIS and then put it back into the community, you know, in 2013 and 14, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be really, really difficult. And it raised a lot of questions. And before even some of those questions, I guess, you know, what you made me think about, and I did mention in our little break that there was a lot of absorbing for me to do again, because there's just so many things floating around, so many ideas and issues and things that could be done or things that need to be challenged or and so on. Was that, you know, how do you make something like this relevant to the, you know, the present day? How, I mean, I guess in visual terms, when you look at some of the paintings, you have the tiger in the arcade, you have the bear in the street, and to take this art movement and put it back in to Borsalt Heath was exactly like the artwork, which is to plonk something that feels like it doesn't belong there anymore or didn't belong there. So how do you, you know, how do you put this thing back in there? How do you articulate that to the local community? How do you make it relevant? Because, and from my perspective, what I'm interested in is, you know, we talk about art for art's sake, and art is a wonderful thing, and I think the production of it's really important, and the way that you talk about Maddox and the enthusiasm with which he went about his work is quite phenomenal, and it makes me smile. But at the same time, from my own position, I talk about the instrumentalizing of culture, which is that we use art or we use culture to bring about some kind of social change, to have an impact, to make a difference. And especially in a world where there are, I guess, limited resources and therefore limited opportunities to make those sorts of interventions, then for me as a cultural engagement practitioner, every little bit that I do has to have that in mind, as in I want to try and improve things for somebody. So you've got this thing coming along, you know, what can it possibly achieve? Can you get people to turn up? And even if you did get people to turn up to these workshops, who are they? Why are they there? Are you able to keep a hold of them? A lot of these activities that we do, you know, one thing that's well known is that it's not simply about getting them through the door, but if it's a program over a specified number of events or workshops, then are you able to retain them? So there are all these questions coming along, and, you know, how much information are they able to get before they arrive? How much are they able to find out or know? And what are their reactions when they see this? You know, what kind of cultural capital are they bringing along? What kind of cultural literacy do they have for them to be able to interpret in particular ways? And obviously we have all these different interpretive communities, you know, different ways of interpreting things. So there are all these different things, and none of it's been resolved. All I still have are these questions, and you know, I'm just saddened that I couldn't come along to the workshops. I'm just too busy. But you know, I guess the thing that I think about the most is in what way can we, you know, can what we have there and bringing it to the current day help us to better understand the world as it's evolved and changed over time, and in what ways can we bring people together to try and understand this? So, you know, we have this diverse city and a diverse kind of a locality with diverse communities. You know, in what ways can we use this, you know, this kind of you know, the work that Maddox produced and the others to bring people together? Can it be, you know, or do we have to manufacture some other route to do that? I just thought I'd mention that. So, yeah.
That's great.
I suspect young children would have no difficulty in accepting surrealism.
Yeah.
That's true.
You're right, yeah.
When you look at children's paintings of what they've seen, it's only when our values are then impacted with prejudice that we stop pushing through to, it stopped us moving forward, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think as well, one of the points that came out of the workshop is that as deliberately as exclusive as surrealist orthodoxy was, everyone has an inner life.
Yeah.
Anyone can have a dream. I have a dream.
Yeah,
So I think there's actually a very important universality within surrealism, but which is often wrapped up in a very exclusive elitist sort of form. Was there a question there?
Not really a question, it's just a kind of thought really, is that even if it's outside your comfort zone, it's quite amazing how communities, like coming from the northeast, there's been a lot of kind of interventionist art projects in the northeast that weren't necessarily welcomed at the time that they were done. But it's amazing how quickly communities can kind of become protective and proud of even if it's a history that they don't feel immediately connected to. If you then frame it in terms of the community and look at how the community has developed and has always been interesting and is still interesting, etc. It's amazing how protective people can then sometimes feel around that and Maybe instill a sense of pride, or even if it's not something immediately relevant, that they might not feel it's immediately relevant on a daily basis.
Sure, absolutely. No, it certainly doesn't. Through some of the workshops, there were people that were thinking quite practically about what a surrealist house could do for the area. They're saying, well, this is great. And they would frame it in terms of place marketing. You know, it'd be good to put Balsall Heath on the art map. It is already on the art map from Ort, but, you know, let's strengthen the profile of Balsall Heath. So I think that's absolutely true. It might not be that everyone in Balsall Heath immediately resonates with a European strand of the avant-garde, but if you open it up to thinking about surrealism as a way of thinking, of integrating kind of dreamlike state, the imaginary, well, that can travel. And then if that doesn't travel, think about it in terms of what it can do for the area in terms of regeneration. That certainly would travel. So I think it's absolutely true that there was people there that were proud to be from Balsall Heath, and if we can do work that draws attention to a heritage and celebrates it, then that would only be positive.
Is it a surrealist map? You know, you could follow
Bridgewater lived here.
Well, no, not yet, but when we did the event at Flatpack Film Festival last year, we did think of developing a cartography of Stephen had the book which is Paris and Surrealism, which is full of places and walks you can do. So we did actually map out half a dozen places in the city centre, and also via Balsall, because in the city centre there's a pub where they all used to meet, which is the Trocadero, which is just off New Street. There's the Cardoma Cafe on New Street. You can still see the vestiges of the sign Cardoma. It's just near Muji. You know Muji, it's just near Muji on the first floor. But they also used to meet after screenings of the International Film Society, which I can't really place that now, but that's where they would go and see, for example, Eisenstein's movies, and then go off and discuss them with the likes of Walter Allen and Henry Reed, and the other, I suppose, group of intellectuals and cultural thinkers in Birmingham at the time. Because that's another manifestation of this type of project. It kind of unearths this link to also a quite vibrant modernist, group of thinkers in Birmingham at the time. But then you've also got some other places they met in the city centre. Then you've also got the art gallery where they were, always trying to do things with and get banned. But then coming down from town, Balsall Heath, and then here, Conroy Maddox he may even have taught in this room because he used to teach extramural classes. So he may have taught in here. So the map would also include this place as well as Speedwell Road and there's a house in Sparkbrook, I think, on Esme Road where he used to live as well. It's a famous photograph of him standing at the outside of a small terraced house where the staircase into the house was from the back. So there's lots of different places, and we could do, and that's just Maddox, because the group was also Emmy Bridgewater, and Emmy Bridgewater's painting is on the front of the Birmingham Surrealist exhibition that was held in 2000. So there's her places and the Melvilles. So there's a really interesting piece of, a walk that could be established that would take people around that, those places, and almost like unearthed from beneath the pavement. A new way of thinking about cultural spaces in Birmingham.
And that's a very nice idea.
Yes, and also we could imagine a contemporary map, a contemporary surrealist map, because when you walk around the city, there are surrealist juxtapositions. There are surreal juxtapositions. Your photograph is absolutely surreal. So you could have, for example, an exhibition of photographs of Birmingham, the surreal Birmingham, because as soon as you start perceiving the world in a surreal way, you see it everywhere, don't you? And that could be a way of bringing surrealism into today's Birmingham, as well as the historical map.
And that's really nice. We could maybe think of a multimedia space as well, perhaps a travelling bus that could play some of the jazz music associated with the wider group, as well as some live poetry readings and some of the visuals associated with paintings and drawings.
Just to go back to the house, didn't Maddox imagine a house with no windows and no doors?
Yeah, I read that.
So I'm not sure if that would be very good in the market.
Town planners might not like it.
I remember reading that as well. It reminded me of Rachel Whiteread's house,
Yes, absolutely,
which was the inverted house with no doors away. I mean, there's an opportunity emerging in Birmingham for some perhaps more public examination of this group of Surrealists, because there's talk of having a Birmingham biennial from 2015. It's called, the working title is called Birmingham Open, and so that would be every 2 years with maybe a strong visual arts theme. And currently there's a group of the City Council and the Hippodrome and other people who are devising new ideas for Birmingham are developing an idea for a biennial. And when they start to look for ideas or themes, maybe there's a contribution that could come from this type of interest in Birmingham's surreal adventures and bring it up to date, and or maybe an artist could be commissioned to recreate some of the adventures of the Birmingham surreal. The nun in the shop drinking a pint of beer, which is the Maddox thing that got banned.
He's had a few things banned.
I like your idea, Fran, of a surrealist app to go with the surrealist map.
Yes.
Yes.
That would be good.
The map would be on the app.
Yes.
And use the arcade. And I think there is quite a strong history of connections between Paris and Birmingham. It's a longer history actually about. So it's not just the Birmingham surrealists in Paris, but other connections. The arcades are a manifestation.
Yeah, I mean that's
so I think there's definitely. I mean, it's a shame in a way that there's such a recent Birmingham surrealism exhibition. Because as an art historian, that's the obvious thing. I would suggest would be an exhibition to which lots of then different kinds of public engagement, cultural engagement events could be attached. But there's only been 2,000, so we could persuade Bean Mag or the Map.
I mean, I find the Birmingham-Paris connection, cutting out London, really interesting. And the dialogue for those artists was that Andre Breton obviously decided that the Birmingham crew were the hardcore surrealists and wanted to have a dialogue with them. And I've always speculated whether Breton came to Birmingham, which is perhaps even more surreal idea than Birmingham having a surreal movement, and whether that could inspire a writer to develop some kind of theatre piece or a short story. Because if Breton did come to Birmingham, what did he find? Who did he meet? But there are other Parisian-based artists that Maddox obviously had long-standing, dialogues with. It'd be really interesting to try and uncover that, and whether it's in publications or in letters or somewhere. But I would like to know more about these Birmingham-Paris connections, so maybe we can have a chat later about those.
I don't know, Pete James and his whole work on photography and the emergence of photography in the mid-19th century. He argued, for example, that photography was invented in Birmingham. Lots of people say it was invented in 1838 in Paris. But there are strong connections there, for example, in terms of the early history of photography between Paris and Birmingham. Just, that's nothing to do with surrealism.
Yes,
And there are, I watched a project called Suburban Birmingham. We definitely kind of found links in terms of fashion, tailoring, etc.
The other link I find fascinating, so if it gets a bit kind of narrow, is the fact that Charles Madge, because you mentioned Charles Madge in your talk, that Charles Madge was part of the mass observation movement in the 30s, which involved surrealists like Humphrey Jennings, etc. Charles Madge was the first professor of sociology in the UK at this university in the early 50s. So I don't know whether that connection in Birmingham with Madge being here had a link with Maddox, whether they knew each other, whether he was brought, whether they were together part of a group as well.
What could be quite nice? I have noticed that just looking around the room, we have some participants that took part in the workshops here today, and it's not to put anyone on the spot at all, but I wondered if anyone wanted to contribute their thoughts to being in the workshops, and if there's any particular ideas that have arisen today that they'd really like to see taken forward, either in Balsall Heath or in the city more widely.
Yeah, you're all feeling
I'm not going to pick anyone out.
a question. You're asking a question?
Yeah.
What was that?
Oh, you missed it. I don't think it was exactly to you, because I don't recall you being at the workshops. But no, it's a question to the participants at the workshops, because I sort of feel like, seeing as the part of the idea behind this whole project was to revisit that heritage in Balsall Heath today. So I sort of thought it'd be nice to have the last word given over to participants in the workshops. But I haven't prepped them for this bit. So yes, I was just wondering if there was any ideas people had. And Barry's going to rescue me at this point.
To be quite honest, I really enjoyed the workshop. It was really good to have sort of people from the communities actually coming in and being, in a way, in some cases, sort of like educated as to what Conroy Maddox was actually saying and what he was actually producing. And then actually, like you say, it's sort of like that pride of Balsall Heath actually emerged from those workshops as well. In fact, it was like, well, I live in Balsall Heath, what about Balsall Heath? Oh, this guy came from Balsall Heath, he had these amazing ideas. And everybody sort of like goes, oh, isn't that really good?
Yeah.
Actually living in an area that's not just sort of like a bit like it, but there's actually things that went on there, there's ideas that came from it. And what I really enjoyed was the fact that once people actually grabbed that idea and sort of like moved with it, we actually perpetuated the fact that there was the Surrealist group and really the Surrealist ideas that were actually sort of like in the area. But where can we go with that? What I really liked the idea of the Surrealist house, natural place.
Yeah.
I think that was just wonderful. And then, as Saskia said earlier, sort of like we got to the point of saying, well, what would this house be? What would it actually sort of like, what would the rooms be like? What would be the purpose of it? How would it progress? And we had a big discussion around these things. I mean, it was at a very, very sort of like early level. I mean, it does need a lot of looking at. But you could see people sort of like, and the ideas, and I think playing sort of like Exquisite Corpse as well, starting people sort of like minds going and looking at sort of like what could actually be produced. So I really thought that was a great idea having that house, because it did actually, it would actually be a centre for this perpetuation of the Surrealist idea. And that's what I thought that was cool.
Fabulous, thank you. And you're right, there was a real firing of people's imaginations, I think, that you've captured really well there.
And I think the way that you actually run with something.
No. Go on.
The way that you actually ran the workshop I thought was really good as well, getting people sort of like thinking in that sort of way, giving them the freedom to start thinking a bit out of the box, and then sort of like saying, well, what do we want to do with this?
Brilliant, thank you so much. And then Arshad, I just saw you had your hand up.
I enjoyed the workshop very much. I have a brief comment to say that explore the imagination and you put your views on as they came into sort of pictures. I'd like to ask, is Conroy Maddox's daughter carrying on with his work and making exhibitions as well?
Well, no, not really. There's probably a contact that comes to me every week, actually, asking for permission to use his images for things. So I always agree to those things. So I feel in that way I'm kind of keeping his work alive, if you like. I'm not in the art world. You know, my background is in social care, so it's different. So I haven't been looking at exhibitions, apart from, you know, Silvano and I having discussions and Geoffrey Sherwin and I having discussions about how we might promote work. And this Oxford Gallery as well, that do have some of his works always there. So that's as far as I've got with that, to be honest. It's difficult, you know. I don't feel I can go touting around in a way. You know, I remember when he showed in Canberra, my son emigrated to Australia, and I went on a visit to see him. And my father said, you know, there is this surrealist exhibition coming up in Canberra, but I really don't think I want to fly. It's just too far. So he gave me various slides and things and said, you know, will you go? You're going to Sydney, so go into the art place there and see what they'll do. And I did that. Showed them the slides, and we had a very interesting conversation, and actually he did have some works in the Canberra exhibition, which was great. But I don't know that I feel I'm in the position to do that now for him. Yeah, so it's an interesting question, but I don't know that I've got the wherewithal to do that, to be honest. Not that I don't want to carry on promoting his work, I do, very much.
Did he have an agent?
No, never, no.
Barry,
do you feel, sort of, as we were talking about sort of Alice in Wonderland and the fact that sort of like within schools it was there and looked at, do you feel that having a sort of mad dad affected you? Sort of like
Yes, undoubtedly it has.
So why you're a care worker?
Yeah, that's why I'm in social care, yeah.
The mad dad.
Well, I do remember he always used to buy me the Edward Lear books. Yeah. I do remember that, yeah. Yes, I mean, he was a lot of fun. He was great fun, actually. So, and I guess a bit wacky, yes, just a bit wacky. And something, you know, quite disturbing, some of his images, and particularly as he got older. And actually nobody wants to buy those. That's quite interesting, I find. And I think if he veered away at all from the spirit of pure surrealism, it would be as he got that much older. Because the pictures, the later pictures, were very much about kind of human features imposed on animal heads and faces. It's not my cup of tea at all. I don't want to look at that on my wall. And I haven't found anybody else who wants to look at it either.
Isn't that surrealist?
Well, it probably is. It probably is. This isn't what you want on your wall.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It probably is, yeah. But, yeah, some images are too disturbing to have around you on a day-to-day basis, you know. Because I lived with Dad when he lived in Lamball Road in London. And my brother and I both did for a time. And of course, every wall was covered, you know, the kind of traditional way of hanging surrealist paintings, you know, one on top of the other. So I was very used to all these images being around all the time, and they're very resonant, you know, even ones that I haven't seen for years. I really remember as part of my growing up. It's extraordinary. Very powerful, actually, incredibly powerful. So yes, lots that I love, but yeah, you have to be a little bit careful. And of course this kind of anti-religious bit that he talks about, I suppose I have inherited that bit. I'm afraid I have. But I think it's not just about being anti-religious with him. I think he was really trying to make a point. You know, it's like the stiletto shoe he did with Wendy Beckett, Sister Wendy Beckett in it. You know, it was a point about the way a nun lives, really. So I think there was always a deeper message in that. So, you know, he provides you with food for thought, I think, and that's valuable, yeah.
I'd love for us to be able to go on. I'm aware that we've already run quite a way over. Are there any final questions or final?
I suppose for me,
yes, good.
I came here to learn about surrealism. Where would I look to find the English surrealists around? On Wikipedia or Google?
Or you can Google it, yeah. The Tate.
The Tate.
Tate would probably be best. Yeah.
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 Thanks.
Or Scotland, if you fancy a trip.
Well, we've had food.
Printed images on the internet, the Scottish things. They don't.
No, but they've got, you know, Penrose, all his stuff is up there as well, so
it's
he's in good company.
They don't print them up on, you can't see a lot of the images.
No, you can't.
Because
No.
presumably for whatever reason. Whereas other places share them a lot more.
That's true, that's true.
Are you on Gmail?
Good one?
Are you on Gmail?
Oh, yes.
Just go to Google Alert and put British Surrealism in as a Google Alert, and then you'll get, every time something crops up online in the world, it'll send you an alert.
That's good. Thanks very much.
You know, do you want, I did one recently for Conroy Maddox, and I've started to get, you know, a regular alert.
Okay.
About your own work.
Sorry?
About your own work. The best of all.
They're the best.
Well, we've
mentioned Silvano's book as well, because
yes, it's called The Scandalous Eye, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you Google Silvano Levy, The Scandalous Eye, you'll come to information on how to order Silvano's book. He can't be here, but he's definitely taking a commission on that.
Well, and he has all the images. Actually, he's got all the images.
Yeah.
Birmingham
Yeah,
Art
exactly.
Gallery. It's the catalogue to do with their exhibition, Birmingham Surrealists. You can get that from the Art Gallery
Still
bookshop.
available, I suppose.
I think so, I'm not sure. They may
it's
have
out of
reprinted
print,
it.
isn't it?
Okay.
I think it might be out of print
Might
at the
be.
moment, but if there's enough desire, I'm sure they'd reprint. Yeah.
And his writings, his articles have been edited by Silvano as well.
There's a catalogue, an analytical catalogue.
Yes, there's...
He's doing a raisonné.
Yes, but there's also, is it Surreal Enigmas?
Yes, the Surreal
Yes,
Enigmas.
which
Well,
brings together all his
Yeah. Yeah.
articles from the 1940s,
That's
etc.
right.
Okay, well, we've had fun, we've had critical thought, we've had the spirit of subversion and play. I hope you've all enjoyed today and found it useful. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. Elaine for heroically coming and filming and recording the event at short notice. All of our participants here. If you'd like us to, by default, keep you updated with future projects of this nature, I'll leave a sheet for you at the front at the end where you just leave your email address and any other contact details. Also, if you've got comments about today, it's very useful for us to have them to know what to do or not do next time, and also to draw on in any other attempts we make for cash for events of this nature. Otherwise, thank you all very much for coming, and a very warm round of applause for our participants. And thank you particularly to Elza for coming, Izzy, and for Lee for sharing her memories and thoughts of her father so warmly and generously. Thank you all.